Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me along to speak. For those who don't know me, my name's Adam Briggs and I'm the Environment Advisor for the National Farmers Union in the North West. And I'm here just to give a brief overview on where we are in relation to ELMS. I'd like to start with a bit of a confession. When we were planning this webinar, originally it was going to be at the beginning of November, and I said, no, put it at the end of November because DEFRA will make an announcement in relation to ELMS and there'll be lots of new information. And they are going to make an announcement, but after tomorrow. So I expect something towards the end of this week. So what I'm going to do today is just talk about what we know so far. Then I'm going to talk about maybe some of the things that's going on in the background that maybe people aren't aware of, which will have an influence in relation to ELMS and how these actually knit together. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we expect to be in the announcement, and also some of the things we're hearing in relation to how ELMS is going to be delivered on the ground. And then I'll talk about something called the Sustainable Farming Incentive, which you might have heard about in the press, which is seen as a stepping stone between where we are now and where we need to get to. So that's very much where we are. It's a bit of a run through some information you may already know. I apologise for that, but that's just because the government have let me down again. So in relation to where we are, ELMS, just to go through the principles, obviously, as everybody's aware, the Environmental Land Management Scheme is coming in and it will replace BPS and countryside stewardship, which are part of the Common Agricultural Policy. The objectives of the Environmental Land Management Scheme are to secure a range of positive environmental benefits, prioritising between environmental outcomes where necessary. So it's not just all about everything for nature. There will actually have to be trade-offs between different outcomes that people want to deliver. And it's also there to help tackle some of the environmental challenges associated with agriculture, focus on how to address these in the shorter term. And the whole agenda around public money for public goods and the whole environmental agenda is very much driven by the government's objectives under the 25-year environment plan and their objections to be net zero by 2050. And the public goods they want to pay for as part of the environmental package are clean and plentiful water, clean air, protection from and mitigation from environmental hazards, adaptation and mitigation to climate change. They want to encourage thriving plants and wildlife, and they want to encourage beauty, heritage, engagement and access. So that is what they want to use ELMS to pay for. You notice food isn't there, and the reason they say that is because food, while it is a public good, there is already a market for it. They want to use ELMS to pay for people for providing public goods for which there currently isn't a market. So can you go on to the next slide, please? So in terms of how the scheme is being developed, we're pretty much know now that there is going to be a 3-tier model. So there will be a base tier 1 level, there will be a mid-tier level, and then there will be a higher tier level. Most of the work and most information we know about relates more to tier 1 and tier 2. Tier 3 is currently something which is being developed, and there's not a tremendous amount of information on that. And I'll go into why that is in a little bit detail later on. In terms of payments, they are going to be they want to pay for basic action. So you do something, you get paid no matter what the outcome is, but there's also a desire to pay for outcomes. That's where they say to farmers, we don't care how you do it, as long as you deliver the outcome, you'll get paid the money. And the payment calculations, I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but at this moment in time, under the current schemes, environmental schemes, they can only pay you for money you've theoretically lost by doing that action. So if you have to take away 4 sheep to deliver environmental outcome, they'll pay the income you've lost from those 4 sheep. And there's a desire to move away from that because that doesn't incentivize farmers to do what they want them to do. In terms of how to develop this, they're very much encouraging a bottom-up approach. So they're doing lots of trial and tests, just looking at how this scheme will work on the ground. And that will then lead into a national pilot. So the theory is by the end of 2024, when ELMS comes in, they've got enough evidence to make sure that what they deliver, what they design, works well for farmers. So next slide, please. So thinking about the tier model, tier 1 is very much a broad and shallow scheme. So the idea is that it's easy for farmers to engage with. Every farmer in the country should be able to get in with that. It's widely applicable. So, you know, if you happen to farm on a hill up in Northumberland, or if you farm down in West Lancashire, there will be things within tier 1 that you can do to get you some money. And it focuses those that are simplest to do and deliver for deliver for the environment at scale. That's tier 1. That's very much like the way I've looked at that. That's cross compliance plus the entry level scheme. It's that sort of approach, a broad and shallow approach. Tier 2 is a lot more targeted. So what you will see in that is that there are specific habitats they want to protect. There are specific activities in a particular location they want to achieve, and that is what they want to really focus on delivering via Tier 2. So there will be priority outcomes in a particular area, and Tier 2 will pay for those, and they'll also encourage farmers to collaborate. And to supplement that, to really encourage that, to underpin that, DEFRA are currently running a number of trials on setting up what they call local nature recovery strategies. And they're running a number of trials across the country. One is taking place in Cumbria and one is taking place in Greater Manchester. And what these strategies will do is essentially they will map the particular habitat in a county. They'll assess if it's in good or it's in bad condition, etc., etc. And then they will actually then try and map the opportunities they have of getting this habitat into a more favourable condition in terms of nature. And it's seen very, very much as Tier 2 and ELMS can potentially be a delivery model for the delivery of a nature recovery strategy at a county level. So what you may see is that part of that under Tier 2, if you happen to be in Cumbria, you might get paid a different amount to what you would get paid in Lancashire for doing the same thing because it's a higher priority being given to that particular action within that nature recovery strategy. The other thing they're looking to deliver money towards their nature recovery strategies is something called biodiversity net gain, which is really catching which is gaining momentum. What that means is that if you are a builder and you put up a building or you put up a development and that gets rid of 10 biodiversity points, you'll then be tasked with finding 15 biodiversity points somewhere else within the country, and you'll have this map to say, if I restore that habitat and pay the farmer to restore that habitat, essentially that gets me my 15 biodiversity habitat points. Therefore, my development has led to a biodiversity net gain across the country. And what they are looking to do, we've got this local nature recovery strategy will be set at a county level, and they're really looking for ELMS and they're really looking for biodiversity net gain, these sort of things, to deliver their ambitions around that. And then we're moving to Tier 3. Tier 3 is largely to talk about permanent land use change. What they talk about there is afforestation, and particularly for the Lowland Crossings, they talk quite a lot about peatland restoration. Now, the long-awaited consultation on the Lowland Peatland Strategy is due out towards the end of this month now, and part of that there will be subgroups set up which will be looking at specific areas, and they're going to look to do Manchester and Liverpool and Merseyside together and look at that as a one to see what potentially could be done to tackle wasted peat in those areas. Next slide. Yeah, so in terms of the basic approach to payments, one thing we don't have is any idea of how much they're going to pay you for doing these sorts of things. Within Tier 1, it'll be very much payments for actions. So you do something and you get paid no matter what the outcome is. So if you leave a corner aside, you manage it as prescriptions, you to provide a habitat for a certain creature. If those creatures don't come, you still get paid. Tier 2, they want to try initially going for actions, but then move on towards outcomes. So they say if you create a habitat for birds, initially they'll just pay for creating that habitat, but moreover, as the scheme goes on, potentially the more birds you have, the more money you'll get paid. So what it's doing is incentivizing the outcome rather than the action. And Tier 3 is very much on a case-by-case basis. Next slide. And this is the latest timeline we have from DEFRA. So as you can see, the two ring points there was when we start losing BPS. So from the BPS payment you'll get this December won't be impacted. The payment you get next year will be. So your BPS will start coming down from 2021. ELMS is going to be available from the end of 2024. But as you can see, the tests and trials run on beyond that. So the thought is that it'll just be potentially Tier 1 that'll be available in 2024, and Tier 2 and Tier 3 will be available as we go through towards 2028. And all during that time, you will still have tests and trials going on to make sure it's fit for purpose. And the new thing they've brought in is something called the Sustainable Farming Incentive, which they're talking about trialling, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail later on. Next slide. So what do we know from the last update we had from the government? They talked about what the cuts would be in 2021 through to initially in 2021, but no details further to that. They are going to simplify the BPS rules in 2021. That's predominantly around getting rid of greening requirements. They will delink the payments from the native farmland in 2022. There'll be a lump sum option, and there's a change in the way they actually regulate and they administer BPS. Next slide. But what we're expecting tomorrow, or later on this week after the spending review, is a lot more information from them in relation to particularly transition. So what we expect them to do is confirm the cuts they're going to make from BPS in 2021 through to 2027. So we'll know what's going to be in 2021. It's those cuts after that they're going to confirm they're going to make. So that will put farmers in a far better position to know exactly what the impact of this transition is going to be on their business and potentially what they can do to mitigate that. We expect a lot more information in relation to when they plan to delink the payments from the need to farm land, and also the implications if you want to take the lump sum option, how it will be treated for tax, what you'll be required, what you can and can't do if you take that lump sum option. More information on how you get involved in the national pilot. The second point there, I thought I'd leave that to last. What we're finding when we're speaking to DEFRA in relation to how they intend to operate the Tier 1 is that they tend to want to operate on what they call a standards approach. So there will be a particular asset, we'll call it arable land, and within that asset there will be certain standards you have to meet around soil quality, around just how we treat arable land in general, etc., etc. And within each individual standard there will be a certain number of actions you have to do, and it'll be up to you to tick as many actions as you want to do to achieve the payment you want. So you'll essentially have a basic payment, a medium payment, and a higher payment. And the thought is that the more actions you tick within a particular standard, the more money you will get. So essentially, actions leads through to payment, to money. And to try and get you from where we are now in terms of BPS through to where we need to go, and when we join ELMS at the end of 2024, they're talking about something, bringing in a stepping stone scheme called the Sustainable Farming Incentive. So do you want to move on one? And that's still very much in development, and it's seen as a stepping stone to get you from BPS Tier 1 ELMS into Tier 1 ELMS in 2024. It'll be a broad sort of approach to deliver environmental outcomes. It'll be building you up from cross-compliance towards ELMS. It'll have a lower level than current environmental schemes. They'll still be available. You'll still be able to go into them. But the actual requirements under the Sustainable Farming Incentive will be lower than that. So any farmer who's currently getting BPS, currently started stewardship, HLS, etc., will be able to apply to go into the Sustainable Farming Incentive, and it's seen as a mechanism to prepare you for ELMS, but also of acquiring some of that money back, which they're going to start taking off you from 2021. It's still very much in development, but I think that's my understanding is that's going to be a real cornerstone of their policy, from getting you from 2021 through to 2024 when ELMS comes in, and also minimising the impact that potentially that reduction BPS will have on your business. And next slide. And the other ways they want to incentivize and they want to spend their money is use some of the money taken off the BPS to deliver animal welfare grants. Use some of the money to promote investment on farm for the adaptation of modern technology. That potentially could be issues in relation to water quality and water resources as well. And also they want to try and incentivize and give money to research institutes to carry out research which can benefit the productivity of farming. So BPS is coming off. Some money will go towards trial and tests. Some money will go towards animal welfare grants, investment support and research and development. But I think the bulk of the cash in the interim will probably end up going into the Sustainable Farming Incentive. But it's very much a watch this space. I apologise for the fact that we didn't have the information but that should be available later on this week. And that's me.